It's time for another story. Welcome to Short Stories with me, Lola. If I say I grew up in a not so religious home, it contradicts what I'm about to share, but you'll understand as you read on. My parents would pray to God and talk to us about Him. They taught us about faith and to believe we will receive what we want and desire if we ask God, if we put it all in His hands and trust that He will do what is best for us. They also taught us how to pray the Muslim way, not leaving us to figure it out on our own. Out of the four of us children, my older brother is really the only one who took it seriously, and still does. The one thing I couldn't figure out growing up, and still don't fully understand, is why my parents, who believe in God so much, also follow traditional prayer practices. As I grew up hearing them talk about God's favor, mercy, and trust, I also saw them appeasing deities like Ifa, Ogun, and Oshun. There were different corners in our home set aside for shrines. They often invited priests to our house for prayers. We would sacrifice certain animals during these occasions, just like you see in the Yoruba movies. I won't lie, I enjoyed those days because of the food and the time I spent playing with my siblings and cousins who came over with their parents. During these prayers, I would watch my parents ask the priest about our lives, about us, their work, enemies if we had any, and our futures. The priests would always respond with messages they claimed were from the gods. Sometimes we traveled to other states or places within our state to visit these priests, where the same rituals took place, always with food involved. Some prayers happened at night, and I was always scared, thinking something bad might happen. It felt like I was in one of these movies I had seen. It was confusing, but I knew my parents would never let anything bad happen to us. One day I asked my dad why we worship these gods, and he said, "We don't worship them. We appease them and ask them to intercede on our behalf. There are many ways to get to God. We don't just stick with or settle for one way. We try different routes and believe God will answer through one of them. You may think this is not classy, but I promise you, some of your friends' parents also pray like this." It still didn't make sense to me, and I thought, no, my friends' parents don't do this. But I let it go, and I went along with it. As I got older, this continued, and in secondary school, I became a bit more interested, but only in the parts where the priest talked about our futures. I wanted to know when I would get married, if the boy I liked me back, or if I would be rich. Silly things like that. I was just a teenager, excited by it all, not knowing any better. When I got to university, I started getting tired of the prayers and trips. It became embarrassing. It wasn't fun anymore, not even the food. During those prayers, I would silently pray to God, asking Him to forgive us for praying to other gods. But the strange thing is, my siblings and I never discussed how we felt about it. My older brother was still into it, especially when it involved praying with alfas. As for my sisters, I'm not sure if they cared much. I can't speak for them. Whenever things got tough financially for my parents, I knew we were about to take another road trip for one of these prayers. My parents never wished harm on anyone or prayed for anything bad. Now that I'm in my 30s and no longer living with them, I'm not obligated to participate in these practices anymore, though my parents still do. We were raised with love and taught to communicate, so my siblings and I share almost everything with our parents. Well, speaking for myself, I share almost everything, but not quite. Whenever I tell my mom about a hardship I'm facing, she always says, "Okay, don't worry. I'll call Yeye to pray and see if there's someone behind it." I often think, does it always have to be a someone? What if it's a trial or test from God, or God trying to teach me something? But I've never had the courage to tell them to just focus on God alone. I remember the first time I fully read the Bible. In the Old Testament, I was surprised to see they sacrificed animals like chicken and goats, just like my parents do. I thought, I get it now. But as I continued into the New Testament, I saw that we are meant to leave those practices behind and follow Jesus. the only way to God. The economy in Nigeria is terrible right now, but God still shows up for me. He's the one I turn to first. Living comfortably without doing anything shady in this economy is only possible through God's help. As I write this, my dad is still waiting to be paid for a job. The payment has been delayed with one excuse after another. He calls to confide in me and asks for financial help, and I'm always happy to assist. But here's the problem. He uses the money I give him for these prayers, searching for answers. But months later, we're still here, and I wonder, why does he keep going to appease these gods who haven't solved the problem, when all he needs to do is talk to God personally and seek his help? God isn't asking for goats or chicken. He isn't asking for money, just faith and trust in him. I hear people say these practices are our tradition, but just like in the Old to New Testament, are we not meant to leave them all behind and focus on our individual connection with God? My parents talk about these prayers and their importance, but they end their conversations with, just trust God, have faith, don't doubt, don't be afraid, be good to others, and let the work of your hands be clean. I'm not sure if you understand now where my confusion stems from. I often think I'm the one who doesn't understand why they do it, but it is what they believe in. They're deeply rooted in their beliefs, and they're adults who know right from wrong. One thing I know for sure is that God sees them, He knows their hearts, and He loves them deeply. Thank you for sharing my story, and thank you for sharing your story. I pray the Holy Spirit blesses you with discernment and clarity. Thank you for watching and sharing.